All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited that I get to spend the next 60, maybe closer to 90 minutes with Q&A, depending on how this goes with you. There is a lot that I want to share with you today on this special presentation titled Welcome to Your Effortless 2022, 3 Keys to a Year of Faster Growth with Less Stress. There are many people who have been on trainings I've delivered in the past, and there are some who are new. So as those who are returning friendly faces know, I try to pack a lot into the time. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. So for everyone who is new and for everyone who has some experience, clear the next 60 minutes, be completely present, close anything that might distract you, whether it is your cell phone, your email, your social media, your browser, or your door, and get something you can use to take notes. Today's session is really all about how to grow your coaching, consulting, or courses business faster and more easily. That's what this is all about. And there is a very special reason why I'm holding this training. And I do have a special surprise for you at the end, which is, you've hopefully come to expect that from me. That is just how I like to roll. But we will get to all that a little bit later. First, I want to tell you how I came to be in a position to even teach you all of this. Now, most of you already know who I am, so I won't do the whole long bio. I know that's never fun to sit through. But there are 2 things that are important for you to know about me. The first is that I have been an entrepreneur for longer than my adult life. My very first business actually started when I was in the 7th grade. I want to tell you that story. So my school cafeteria at the time would have a few different options for lunch. There was the sandwich for $2, which I did not like at all. And there was the spaghetti with tomato sauce, which I absolutely loved. It was my favorite thing in the world. I'm sure it wasn't actually that good, but to my mind at the time, it was amazing. And that cost $3. But my parents would only give me $2 for lunch because $2 could buy me a perfectly good lunch. So I wanted the spaghetti, but I couldn't afford it. So I had a problem to solve. And this is, anytime I've ever started a business or built something, it's been because I had a problem to solve. Now, every day, this is something I noticed, every day I would have lunch with my good friend Jonah, and every day he would buy his lunch and also a can of Coke, which cost him $1. Except I knew that my friend didn't actually like Coke all that much. His favorite drink was cream soda, but the cafeteria didn't sell cream soda. So I figured out that I could go with my parents to Costco and I could buy a tray of 24 cans of cream soda for like $5. And every day I would bring to school a can of cream soda, which I sold to my friend for $1 that he was going to spend anyway on something that he didn't actually want. So I could go to the school cafeteria and get the spaghetti, problem solved. That was my first business that generated a whopping $1 of daily profit until I shut the business down because I moved away. Now, I kept doing little projects like that. And by the time I was 15, I was so bored with school that I decided to quit and go full time. And so I quit school. I'm a high school dropout. I did go to school, go back to school later and get an MBA. So I have, those are all my professional academic certifications. I have an elementary school diploma and I have an MBA, nothing in between. So I kept doing little projects like that. And, I've always been an entrepreneur. And that's the first thing that you kind of need to know about me to understand where this is going. The second thing that you need to know about me is that I've always been fascinated with Leonardo da Vinci. And there's a lot that's fascinating about him as a character, but what really grabs me and inspires me is that he was literally centuries ahead of his time in so many different fields, not just 1 or 2 or 3, but, countless, the quintessential Renaissance man. And he did not have access to any of the high-tech tools or technologies that we do. He was not even formally educated, right? All he had was curiosity and critical thinking. And that's all any of us need to really unlock so many possibilities. So I found that really inspiring. And about 15 years ago, my fascination with Leonardo da Vinci and my entrepreneurial streak converged when I decided to build a business that would use Leonardo da Vinci's story to create a software package that would help kids learn how to read. That, what you're looking at on the screen, that is me at our trade show booth at the International Reading Association conference in 2007. Back then, my shirts were much more shiny. Thank God that has changed. This was my first attempt at building a really big company, developing software, raising money, the whole 9 yards. And for a while, it worked great. We won a whole bunch of awards. The experts loved it. We raised a bunch of money. We got some critical acclaim in the industry, and the kids loved it. They really got into the games that we created, and they were seeing improvements in their reading, which was the whole point. But then it all fell apart. And there are a lot of reasons for why it all fell apart, but it really comes down to two things. First, I was in just way over my head. I was a young and very inexperienced CEO in what in hindsight is one of the most complicated industries on the face of the earth. And second, the timing was terrible. Eventually, things were not working. I basically figured it out. I was like, all right, here's how I've got to do it. I've got to raise money. Let's make it happen. I was just about to hit the pavement to raise my next round of financing. And that was September of 2008. And you all remember what happened in September of 2008. The markets crashed. All of a sudden, there was no money to be had. It was game over. So it all fell apart. And I didn't want to go back to my investors, many of whom were friends and family, and tell them that their money was gone. So I took the losses on personally. And all told, I walked away from that experience with about $250,000 in personal debt. So to say that I was broke would be a dramatic understatement. So I needed to make money, and I needed whatever plan I took, I needed it to work, which raises a question. The title of this session is Effortless 2022. And so what do I mean when I say effortless? I want to be really clear about this, because for some people, the word effortless probably conjures images of, sitting back, money spits out of your laptop, maybe you're doing it on a beach. That is not what I'm talking about. When I say effortless, I mean effortless as in the opposite of futile, right? Not that you are not putting in effort, but you're putting in effort and it's really paying off, right? You push and the thing moves. That is the experience of effortlessness. I was willing to work, but I needed my work to pay off. And that is the position that I find a lot of the people that I tend to work with are in. And that's who this training that I'm delivering right now is for. And so I want you to put the word yes into the chat if you can agree with this statement. I am willing to work and I really need my work to pay off. Put the word yes into the chat if you agree with that. All right, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. And that is fantastic, right? So you are exactly where I was, not necessarily with the setback, not necessarily with the debt, but in terms of being willing to work and needing it to pay off. And it did pay off because of two things that I had going for me. And I'll tell you what both of those things were in a moment. But long story short, I hit on some things that really worked well and my business took off. And I hit all the crazy milestones, the $40,000 weekend, the $100,000 launch, the best-selling book, the $1 million year. And it actually felt really weird when it was all happening. I felt uncomfortable talking to my friends about what I was experiencing because I knew what it sounded like. It sounded like I just stepped off of some tacky infomercial, but that's what was actually happening. And my business went from zero in the first year to $250,000 to more than $500,000 to more than $1 million to almost 3 to almost 4. So really rapid growth. And it's not just about dollars or numbers, right? I got to speak at places like Yale and Google. I got to publish multiple best-selling books. I got to travel around the world back in a time when that was possible. I got to be present for all the major milestones in my kids' lives while all this was happening. And I get to work with people that I love. Now, if you think that you're hearing what is shaping up to be a rags to riches kind of story of, look how well I did and you can do it too, well, think again. But more on that in just a bit. Right now, you're probably wondering, Dan, you said there were two things that made it all happen. What were those two things that you had going for you? Well, the first thing that I had going for me was talent. I was good at what I do, as I know that many of you are. Put the word good into the chat if you're like, yeah, I am good at what I do too. I'm good at my area of subject matter expertise, right? That is important. Obviously, you're not going to be rich, successful, and make a great impact on the world doing something you're not even good at, right? So we're all good at what we do. So I had that going for me. But there was a second ingredient that created that success. It wasn't just about the talent. It was also about opportunity. Right? I was at the right place at the right time in the market, right? I saw where my talent could meet that opportunity. And that is the combination that leads to success. Talent combined with opportunity leads to success. And so those two things converged and things worked out really well. Except that there was a third variable in the mix. And that variable was inexperience. I was young and I was early in my career, and I didn't have the perspective to understand how much of my success was because of my talent and how much was because of the right opportunities being in front of me. And when that happens, it is a recipe for hubris. I was having all this success, right? So that must mean I'm just a freaking genius. So I thought for a moment there that I had the hand of Midas, that I could turn anything to gold by sheer force of will. And of course, that was not the case. And believing that everything would work just because I thought it was a good idea led to a period of stagnation for my business. And so, yeah, we had this rapid ascent. But how did things continue? We went from $3.85 million in revenue in 2016 to $3.85 million of revenue in 2017. And from there, we grew to $3.9 million with, by the skin of our teeth. And then in 2019, we actually declined. We dropped down to $3.5 million. And I look at this trend, riding the front of this carriage and looking at where I'm going and what I'm bringing with me. And I'm like, what is going on here? Now, I'll tell you what was going on, but I have to pause and step outside the story for a moment, because there are probably some people on this call right now who are hearing me say this and they're thinking, really, Danny, only $3.5 million, cry me a river. And it's true that we did still have a good business with customers who got lots of value from what we did for them, and that was all great. But it's not just that our business wasn't growing, it's that everything was getting harder. It felt like I was pushing a boulder up a hill, like nothing was working. Like no matter how much time and energy I spent, I couldn't seem to make this thing work. And so I did what a lot of entrepreneurs do. I kept finding ways to pull a rabbit out of my hat. And here's how I define a rabbit out of my hat in an entrepreneurial context. It is finding some creative way to make some money so you can live to fight another day, but without solving the underlying issues in your business. Put the word rabbit into the chat if you've ever pulled a rabbit out of your hat on one or maybe multiple occasions. This is a very common MO for a lot of entrepreneurs. This is part of our core skill set. When we have to, we find a way to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And I see many of you have been there and can relate. And so I'm in this position where I have to keep pulling rabbits out of my hat. And at some point you start wondering, how many more rabbits are in there, right? At some point there's going to be a limit to what I can figure out. And so I was frustrated, but I was also confused because I knew what it had felt like before. I knew about that incredible momentum and rapid ascent. And that raised the question, put bluntly, what the hell? What was causing this? Why had it gotten so hard? And I had a lot of theories. Right? Maybe it was that there were too many competitors. The market had just become too saturated. Or maybe the timing was bad. I was lucky to build my business when times were good and now my model didn't work anymore. Or maybe the technological landscape had shifted and I just missed the boat. And for the record, that's usually not what it is. So I had lots of excuses, but I couldn't really believe any of those were true because some of my competitors were doing just fine. And so if they could make it work, why not me? Right? The question was, what were they doing that I wasn't? And even more importantly, what was I doing before that I wasn't anymore, back when it felt easy? And that's when I realized that I was seeing business as this difficult game that you need a clever strategy and brilliant execution to win at. Because there are a lot of hard things that we have to do. We have to cut through the noise so that people hear us. We need to grab people's attention. We need to convince people to buy whatever we're selling, even if sometimes it feels like they don't really want it. And then one day I'm going for a walk and this crazy thought occurred to me. Does it really have to be so hard? What if it didn't? What if it didn't have to be hard? Instead of fighting to come up with brilliant strategies to do these hard things, what if I could just make it easy? What if it wasn't hard to reach my prospects? What if they sought me out? What if they didn't need to be sold because they were practically tripping over themselves to buy? What would it take to make that happen? And I spent a year figuring out what it would take to do that. And that led to an idea. And that idea crystallized over the course of months and turned into a model. And eventually I turned that model into a book. And I called that book Effortless because that's exactly what this whole methodology is meant to create, a sense of effortlessness as you work to grow your business. And I teach the model in great detail at our Lift conference, and I've taught it to thousands of combined attendees. We used to do it as an in-person event here in Montreal, and since the pandemic, we've been doing it virtually. And we've actually got another Lift event coming up right around the corner. And I'd love for all of you to attend as my guest. And I'll tell you more about that invitation later. But now let's talk about what drives the power of this model. At core, it's the idea that, to paraphrase Jeffrey Gitomer, people don't like being sold, but they love to buy. People don't like being sold, but they love to buy. So it sounds cute, it sounds clever, but also sounds like, wait a minute, what actually is the difference? Well, the difference is that buying feels like I came, I saw, I conquered, right? There's something I wanted and I took it, I made it mine. It is an empowering feeling. It feels great. It gives us a sense of control. That's why when people have a feeling that their life is out of control, they sometimes turn to retail therapy. Let me just find something that I want and buy it, and I have some control over my life, right? Buying feels great. On the other hand, being sold is the opposite of that. Being sold is all about settling. Being sold is about not getting what you want and being convinced that you should still be happy with it. The difference between having to sell to people and just allowing them to buy is all about aligning with their desires. And it's aligning with their desires on 3 dimensions. The first dimension is what? What is it exactly that they want to buy? And a great example of this is Amazon. I heard an interview years ago when someone asked Jeff Bezos some question about, like, where do you see the industry headed, or what are some big trends that are going to change everything, something like that. And Bezos's answer was really insightful. He said, I don't actually spend a lot of my time thinking about what is going to change. I spend most of my time thinking about what will always be the same. So for example, there is no scenario, I cannot imagine it happening, that 10 years from now, someone calls me up and says, Jeff, I love Amazon, I love it. I just wish the prices were higher. Nobody's ever going to say that. People will always want lower prices. That is a constant. Nobody's ever going to call me in 10 years and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish it took longer for things to get to my house. People will always want faster delivery. No one's ever going to call me in 10 years and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just love it. But, I wish there wasn't so much selection. I wish there were less options. People will always want lower prices, faster delivery, and more selection. And that is what we spend all of our time at Amazon working to provide, right? That is how they lean into allowing people to buy what they want. So that's the first dimension. The second dimension is who. Who do they want to buy from? Because people do care who they are buying from. And there are great examples of this, right? Steve Jobs was a brilliant business person. He built an amazing company. But part of the reason why they did so well is that when people bought from Apple, they were buying the ideology of Steve Jobs, right? Elon Musk, love him or hate him, the success of Tesla is partially because it's a great company and partially because of the ideology of Elon Musk that so many people buy into, right? Likewise, Sarah Blakely, the CEO and founder of Spanx, and the list goes on. So that charismatic, resonant leadership is really important. And finally, the third dimension is how. How is it that people want to buy? And a great example of this is Uber Eats. I'm hungry, I open my phone, I see recommended to me a food that I'm probably gonna like, I click on a button, 20 minutes later, food is at my door. It is absolutely frictionless, right? That's not a judgment on the ethics of the company, by the way, but it is a frictionless buying experience. I'm able to buy in exactly the way that I want. So those are our 3 dimensions: what, who, and how. And when you align what you are selling with what people want to buy, you have an obvious offer. When you are aligning who you are with who they want to buy from, you have a resonant identity. And when you're aligning how it is that they want to buy with the way it is that people are going to consume, you have an intuitive path. And when you create that sort of alignment with your customer, you've got an obvious offer, a resonant identity, and an intuitive path. Things start to get easier. And instead of feeling like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, you suddenly feel like you're rolling a snowball down one. You still got to push the snowball, but the more you push, the faster it seems to be moving. It starts feeling effortless. Now, walking through the entire framework in detail will take hours. That's why I wrote a whole book about it. And I do spend hours going through this framework at Lyft, but I will tell you how you can get access to all of that training. But first, I want to share how it all came together for me, right? I developed this model and the proof is in the pudding. So I'm sure you're wondering, well, Danny, did it work? And yes, it did. It actually worked surprisingly well and surprisingly quickly. So when I last was telling you this story, we stopped in 2019, where we were languishing at $3.5 million in revenue. Well, late 2019 is when I started developing and implementing this model. Fast forward a year, we closed 2020 with over $7 million of revenue, just shy. We just closed this last year with just over $9 million in revenue. And we're on track to break 8 figures this year. And that growth led to more opportunities, including bringing together some of my favorite businesses and entrepreneurs under one roof. Namely, many of you already know this because you've heard the various announcements. Rizuku and Ready to Go Articles and the Coach's Console and Story Coach and the Writer's Ally are all part of the Mirasee group now. And so, success begets even more. And it's all because of this framework for effortless business growth. Now, I want to walk you through it in detail, but like I said, that would take days. And that is why I'd like to invite you to attend Lift, where you will get that deep dive training. And I want to give you a taste of what you will learn at Lift. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough now of part of our framework, including a super powerful copywriting formula that you can apply to your business immediately. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit more about Lift, the event. It is 3 powerful days of immersive training. We focus on, first of all, how to make growth easy. So you'll learn all about my 3-part effortless business growth model. You'll learn the aligned business, the 3 keys to expert business growth. You'll learn about ethical enrollment, how to enlist partners and prospects in your vision. And you'll learn how to create customer success and build a profit flywheel. And that's just the beginning. Then we're going to step up your mindset. You're going to learn how to think like a winning entrepreneur. We're going to talk about the science of setting and achieving heroic goals. We will learn how to make good decisions about money and risk. And we'll talk about the obstacles that expert businesses face and how to overcome them. And then we go deeper. We're going to build momentum with the skills that you need to really make a dent in the universe. We're going to talk about creating real success partnerships and carrying success forward. We're going to talk about compounding success and changing the world. And we build on this powerful core curriculum with amazing guest instructors. So you're going to hear from world-class teachers, my personal mentors and colleagues who have run multi-thousand-person global organizations, grown massive businesses, and advised the very best of the best. And as great as the training is, it's not just about the training. Lift combines training with coaching and connection. There is a curated, intimate, and supportive community. So you get to establish relationships, develop partnerships, and build lifelong friendships. It's really an opportunity to end that isolation of entrepreneurship and move forward in connection and community. And you get individual one-on-one coaching. Every attendee gets a dedicated session with a coach on my team to clarify your vision, identify roadblocks standing in your way, and create an action plan to bust through them. So when is this happening? It is April 7, 8, and 9, 2022, just a few weeks away. And where is it happening? Well, we had wanted to go back to in-person events in Montreal, but Delta and then Omicron and so on and so forth. So it is virtual, meaning that if you're on this workshop right now, you have the technology and setup to participate. So that only leaves one question. How much does it cost? Well, we've sold tickets to attend Lift in the past for as much as $1,000, and people have paid that ticket plus, the hotel, the flights, and everything. But now you can participate from the comfort of your home for the last call pricing of just $197. So if you want to be a part of this, you can go to www.lift.live and reserve your ticket. And my team will put that link into the chat. Now, I promised you a taste of what we will cover at Lift. So I'm going to give you that taste right now. And I want to walk you through a piece of what I teach in just one part of the effortless business growth framework about the intuitive path. So again, this is one part of one section of what we cover. We cover so much more. But let's talk about the intuitive path. This is also known as your customer journey, also known as your funnel. And what makes your funnel into an intuitive path isn't the mechanics or the technologies or whether it's video or audio or messenger bots or whatever. It is the message. And so I'm going to give you a 5-part copywriting formula that you can use to create the beginning, the skeleton for that intuitive path. So here's the formula. We start by meeting people where they are. Then we describe their worldview. Then we share a deeper insight. Then we explain a solution, and finally, we end with a call to action. So let's go through these 5 steps one by one. And the first is to meet people where they are. And this is the opposite of how most marketers approach things, which is, essentially some version of, look, I'm an expert at this, now listen up, I'm going to tell you how it is. Maybe you're not so over the top about it, but when you're looking to provide a solution, it is natural to want to start with that solution. Let me tell you about this thing that I'm an expert in. Except that at this stage, people won't care. You can have the cure for cancer. People will not care because they don't know that you care, right? I love this line. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. People only know that you care when they feel understood, that you understand what they are experiencing. And what you have to care about is their experience of either pain, right? The physical, actual, emotional pain that they're experiencing, right? Pain meaning there is something that they have but do not want, or desire, which is something that they want but don't have, right? Nobody ever moves unless there is something they have but don't want, or want but don't have. So we're cluing into one of those two things. And whichever it is, you need to start by just describing what they're feeling, not editorializing, not talking about root causes, not providing solutions, just describing it so they can listen and nod and be like, yes, exactly. You know what I'm feeling, right? I've got these ads I found online that I want to share as an example because they're so powerful at doing exactly this. So read these for a moment. The first, she speaks Mandarin, she did a gap year at the UN, and unlike you, she doesn't need IT on speed dial. Second one, he's got a first from Oxford. He's got a full head of hair, and unlike you, he hasn't got a baby keeping him up all night. Third one, she kickboxes at 5 a.m. She wants your office, and unlike you, she isn't going through a messy divorce. Now, I want you to notice something, right? Two things, actually. One, notice how powerful this is. And it's powerful even though the ad says nothing about the product. It's all implied. This is all about the prospect feeling understood. And you might read this and be like, you know, this is so powerful. You might read this and be like, I don't like this, right? Depending on whether you're, you know, well targeted by this or not. But this is all about someone reading and being like, wow, you get me. You understand what I'm really concerned about. The more specific, the better. You want to really get inside their head and describe what you see there more clearly than they can describe it themselves. Now, you can meet them where they are just by describing where they are in so many words, and that works some of the time. But the other option is to share your story or to share any story, right? You know, I started this presentation telling you about my story, about how I found myself in a position where I was willing to work, but it had to work. And that was a point of connection. If you're listening, you're like, you know, I'm in the same boat. I am willing to work, but I need it to work. And anyone who's like, nah, I don't really need it to work, whatever, you know, they're probably not still on this call, which is totally fine because that's not who I'm trying to be talking to. So you tell your story, or you tell any story, right? It doesn't have to be yours, but the human brain is wired to make sense of the world through story. And when we hear a story, we automatically and implicitly cast ourselves as the protagonist. That is how our brains make sense of story. And that's why stories have this powerful, visceral appeal. However you do it, that is the first step. You meet people where they are. And then the second step is to describe their worldview. And for most of the people that I train, this is the hardest part. It is the hardest part because to do it right, you have to say something that you know is not true. I'm going to say this again. To do this part right, you have to say something that you know is not true. Now, let me explain why that is and what I mean by that. And to understand this, we have to take a very quick detour into a lesson in human psychology. Specifically, we need to talk about cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the challenge that we all have holding two opposing ideas in our minds at the same time, which is why it is true that, you know, I love this line, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Now, here's the thing. This is a slightly elitist way of presenting it. The reality is that we can all do it. Everyone's capable of holding two opposing ideas in mind at the same time, but it's hard, right? We can do it if we're concentrating, if we're making an effort. It's uncomfortable, and so usually we just avoid it. That's not a judgment of anyone, that's just human nature. So with that being true, what does this have to do with marketing? Well, remember where we began. We began with pain or desire. Pain and desire translates to a belief, right? If you have pain or you have desire, you have a belief that there is something that I really want to change. right? If you have pain or desire, but you don't want to change it, that doesn't add up, right? Pain or desire means there's something I want to change to make it different. But if you have that belief, it raises a question, well, then why haven't you changed it, right? If there's something I want to change and I could easily change it, then I would change it. And so if there's something I want changed that is still a persistent problem, then that requires a second belief. There must be a good reason why I can't change it, right? We have both of these beliefs are kind of required for people to have in their minds, right? I have pain or desire, so there's something I really want to change, but I continue to have this pain or desire. So there must be a good reason why I can't change it, right? Otherwise, you're stuck with cognitive dissonance. There's something I really want to change, and I could easily change it, but I'm not changing it. So, essentially, I must be a freaking idiot. But nobody wants to own and live in that worldview. And so if there is something I really want to change, and yet I have not changed it, there must be a good reason why I can't. And this belief can be rationalized in a lot of different ways. It can be that I don't have the skill or the time or the money to do it. It could be that the system is rigged against me. It could be that it is my genes that make it impossible for me to solve this. It could be that society is conspiring to keep me down. It could be that this is just how it is, right? And many of you are coaches. As coaches, you know that these are all excuses. Even if the facts are true, they can be worked around. But whatever the story, it is compelling enough to them that they can believe it. And this story does something really important. It externalizes responsibility. In other words, it rationalizes why the problem isn't their fault. And once you have a story that you've bought into, it's very hard to change it. As Johann Hari writes, once you settle into a story about your pain, you're extremely reluctant to challenge it. But that's exactly what you have to do. And the first step is to articulate the story that they've bought into, even though you know it isn't true. Because you don't want to meet people, essentially say, you have this pain, guess what, it's your fault, right? How much of their attention or engagement do you think that's going to buy? Not a lot. Right? They're just going to say, oh, you don't understand me. You don't know my reality. You haven't walked a mile in my shoes. And so you have to start by articulating the story that they have bought into. And again, this is hard for us because we know that this is a solvable problem. We know that you can solve this problem. We know the story is not true, but they don't know what we know. And so they're just going to hear that we don't understand them. And so if you help people, let's say with weight loss, then you might say out loud, you might articulate to them, well, of course it's not your fault. All the diet programs are bogus and impossible to stick with. It's really about metabolism and genetics, which I can't change. That might be what they're thinking. And so you articulate, of course it's not your fault because of this. You know this isn't true, but now is not yet the time to say that. If you help people with their productivity, you might say, look, there are just too many unreasonable demands on my time that I can't control. As long as I work for someone else, it's out of my hands. As an expert in productivity, that's not true. There are things they can do, but this is what they believe, and they have to feel understood before they will listen to you, right? If you teach people about marketing, as I happen to do, I might relate to what others are feeling by saying, well, look, if you're operating in a saturated and competitive market, there's no choice but to fight for your audience's attention and wallet. You have to articulate what they are thinking and feeling. And this is very hard for experts because it is not true. But before they will listen to your solution, they have to trust that you understand the problem. And it all comes back to their externalization of responsibility. So we have to articulate that. That is the next step. But once we've described their worldview, now we can move on to the next step, which is to share a deeper insight. Right? You say, this is your pain, and look, it's not your fault but here's what you're missing. Here's what you don't know, right? In other words, once you've found the villain in their story, you can show them how to defeat it. Now, here's a key insight. This is not about providing a solution. This is not about, I know this is what you think, but you can solve it with my problem or my process or my framework. This is about changing a worldview. It's about opening a door to a new world of possibility, right? It is about helping them understand that, in fact, not that you can solve their problem, although obviously you can. It is about helping them see that the problem is, in fact, solvable, right? This is the part where you tell them what they're missing and why their story about the problem not being solvable isn't true. And once you give them that deeper insight, that more nuanced worldview in which the problem can actually be solved, now you can talk about how to do it. Now we go from sharing the deeper insight to explaining the solution. And this is the part where you build a bridge into that new reality. You tell them what the steps and ingredients are that allow them to get what they want. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Danny, I've been waiting patiently. We're on step 4 already. Is this the part where I finally talk about my coaching or my courses or my services? And the answer is still no. This is one of the most important lessons here. Good marketing doesn't push your offer. It helps people understand why they need an offer like yours. I'm going to say that again. Good marketing does not push your offer. It helps people understand why they need an offer like yours. And what you want to do is show how you arrived at the insight that allowed you to create a solution in the first place. You know, there are a lot of definitions of marketing out there, but my favorite definition comes from Rich Schefren. It's not about, pouring salt in the wound or agitating demand or anything like that. Marketing is simply an accelerated version of the experiences that led you to believe in your offer. Right? There was a time when you did not believe in your offer. You were not born believing in your offer, but you had a series of experiences that led you to believe in your offer. So how can we accelerate that process? How can we condense it for the people that you're going to serve? What were the pivotal moments that led you to believe in what you're doing? Notice that once again, we are in the realm of story. And in fact, most of these steps are best accomplished through story because, like I said before, that's the best way for our brains to absorb new ideas. And once you're done, now there's only one step left. And if you go through this whole process, it's actually the easiest one. After you've met them where they are and described their worldview and shared the deeper insight and explained the solution, now you can offer them a call to action. This is the part where you actually tell them what to do next, whether it's to register for a webinar or book a call or buy what you're selling. And this part only gets hard if you didn't do your job along the way to get here. Then they aren't coming pre-sold and the path isn't intuitive. But if you do your process well, then that part is easy. Now, this is just a very small piece of one part of the framework, which is only one part of what we teach over the 3 days of Lift. So if the last close to an hour was helpful, if it was insightful, if it gave you tools that you can apply to get better results in your business for your clients, then I would very strongly encourage you to take advantage of these 3 days of training that you can grab for just $197. We're offering this training at this price because I see it as an investment in my future relationship with you. It cost us that much just to put on the event and ship you all the cool stuff we're going to ship you, which I won't tell you what it is, but it's cool. Lots of good surprises, right? I want this to be a tremendous experience for you, and it is our investment in our relationship with you. So if you want to do this, go ahead, go to www.lift.live and book your ticket. Just make sure you do it by this Sunday, because Sunday, March 13th is the last day to sign up, and then we are closing registration. And if you're thinking, Danny, I want to do this, I'm in, can I bring someone? Can I bring my significant other, my business partner, my friend? Can I tell other people about it? The answer is, of course you can. Because in my experience, great people know other great people. And if you're here, you're the kind of person that I want to be with us at Lift. And so the people you know will fit that description as well. And obviously, if they live in your house with you, they can just sit next to you in front of the screen. But anyone else, just send them the link, www.lift.live. And we would love for you and the people that are closest to you to join us. So with that, I said I would try to get you in and out in an hour and leave some time for Q&A. And so here we are. If you have questions, by all means, put them into the chat or raise your hand, and I will do my very best to give you the best answers that I can. Oh, and thank you to everyone who's saying really nice things about Lift in the chat. That's very gracious to hear. Thank you.
All right, folks, when you are ready, feel free to pop questions in the chat. We've got a question right away, Danny, from Diane, who's asking, how long is each day's program?
Yeah, so it's a full day that is designed to be different time zone friendly. And so we start the day at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, which is 7:30 a.m. Pacific. And the day goes until 4:30 Eastern, which is 1:30 Pacific. Then we have an evening session, which is 6 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Pacific. So it kind of works across North America. It also works if you're in Europe, you might have to stay up a little bit late, but you're still good. And we have actually had a lot of people attend from further east, from the Middle East, from Australia, from Asia, and they just treat it like they were flying to an event. If you were to fly to Montreal, you would adjust your time zone for the time that you're here. Well, this way you don't have to be in a hotel, you don't have to get on a plane, you don't have to do anything that is uncomfortable in that way. You just adjust your schedule for those 3 days. So 10:30 a.m. Eastern to 4:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern each day.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad you talked about the time zone because I was going to bring that up. That's usually a frequently asked question. We also have a question from Vivian earlier in the chat here who asked, where can I buy your book at a discount? I know we can find your books on Amazon. Do you have any other advice for Vivian?
Well, I mean, they're not expensive on Amazon. I think it's like $6 or $7 on Kindle. So, you can just find it online. It's not hard to get.
Thank you. All right, so we've addressed the timing of the days. We've addressed time zone differences. This is another frequently asked question, Danny. What happens if somebody can't attend part of one of the days? What happens?
The world ends. It's terrible. No. I'll tell you what. I want everyone who registers to be as present as they possibly can. So, don't plan to catch recordings later. That's not a thing that we do. But with that being said, we're all busy, we're entrepreneurs. If you have to miss a session for whatever reason, the program is designed to accommodate that. And I'm going to actually teach you some really powerful strategies for handling that and making the most out of the training in spite of that, kicking off the very beginning of the first session.
Awesome. And can we just repeat one more time? We have a question. Can we review again the schedule? The full days are April 7th, 8th, and 9th. We always like to say, pretend as if you had gotten on the plane. Like Danny said, he flew to Montreal and you're there all day in person. So basically clear your calendar. But the times again, Danny, would you mind reviewing that one more time?
10:30 to 4:30 Eastern. And you can translate to whatever time zone you're in and works for you.
Great, and I'm putting that in the chat for you all too. So that's for all 3 days. So as you can see, it's like an all-day thing. So we encourage you to clear your calendar to be there with us. I promise it's also fun. And Kathy's asking, do you recommend that ACES members attend? We have a lot of folks here who are in existing Mirasee programs. What advice do you have for those folks, Danny?
So I'll give you my blanket answer, but I'll also tell you how to get a better, more specific answer. So my blanket answer is that a lot of ACES entrepreneurs do attend LIFT multiple years in a row, both for the training and also to kind of observe the structure of the event. There's a lot to learn in terms of modeling there. But specifically for you, I would say ask your coach what is the best use of your time, and your coach will guide you in the best way possible.
Great. And I love this question from Laura. Laura says, I'm excited to attend. Danny, what is your favorite topic that you teach during LIFT and why?
That's such a great question. It's really hard to point to just one thing. There are a lot of events out there where, it's like, every hour there's a different presenter and they're basically trying to sell you something. LIFT is me on stage for 3 days teaching. And, yes, there is a next step that I will invite you to explore if it's a good fit, but that's, less than 10% of the time that I'm teaching is about that. And a lot of the training it's all stuff that either has been really transformative for me and for my clients and students on a business level, or has been really impactful on a personal way of looking at the world and thinking about business kind of level. And there's a lot that I share that is actually quite personal in terms of my journeys and my experiences. And so I can't point to just one thing because there's so much there. You're going to have to come and see for yourself, but it's a lot. In my head, I'm like mentally making a list, and the list is getting longer and longer. So I can't point to just one.
I test Danny. The whole thing is awesome. And I think it's a little personal too, Laura. I'll be curious to see what you decide after you attend as well. We have a question from Jorge in the chat. Can you review, what about the evening sessions that you mentioned, Danny? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they start around 6 p.m. Eastern and usually go for about an hour and a half.
Great. And sometimes we have guests join us. So that's always a surprise. Thankfully, Danny hasn't told me anything about it because I will I'll ruin the surprise every time. So don't tell me, Danny, because I'll tell them.
My lips are sealed.
All right. Oh, this is a great question from Mary in the chat. Can you please share how the partner organizations are integrated into the weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's integrated, through and through in that, we work very closely together, and some of the best insights that I take away from, all those explorations are shared from the stage. We have, members of all the various communities participating and being present, which is great. And for the last couple of years, Melinda Cohen, who is the CEO of the Coaches Console, she's done a lot of the emceeing for the event. So we're quite well integrated.
Wonderful. Siegfried is asking a question in the chat. Danny, what made you change the name of your company? He says, I'm sure I read something about it when it happened, but I forgot now. Sounds like you've been with us for a while, Siegfried. Was that part of that transition you mentioned with respect to the stagnation you experienced?
No, so not really. It was its own thing. We changed the name of the company a very long time ago, I think like maybe 7 years ago or something. So before any of that happened. But the very short version, and for the benefit of people who don't know what we're talking about, when I started the company, it was called something else. And it was just not a great name. It was a name that, I'm not great at naming things all the time, and I ran out of ideas, and I didn't have a clear vision of what the business was even going to be because I was still figuring it out. And so I went with the best name that I could. And over the years, it just became less and less and less of a good fit, to the point where like I'd be at a conference and someone says, what's the name of your company? And I would cringe because I don't want to tell them. And when you have that feeling, it's time for a new name.
I love it. All right. And we have another question about like the times for breakouts to meet during the days. Danny, I'm going to kind of paraphrase this because this is a common question. People want to know, like, but what is the schedule, Danny? What am I going to be doing minute by minute, hour by hour? What kind of advice do you have for our folks? We know the times are 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. each day. And on day 1 and 2, we have an optional evening event at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. But those are really big blocks of time. So how do we explain that to our folks here?
So there's a high level breakdown of topics, at www.lift.live, so you can find that there. But in terms of the flow of the actual sessions, there are, a well-organized, well-designed experience is going to have all the nuances that make it very hard to be like, well, in the first 5 minutes we're doing this, and the next 2 minutes we're doing that. That kind of breakdown won't be helpful. So trust that it is woven together very well. There will be many opportunities for you to interact with your colleagues and peers, both between sessions and during sessions in different groups and different formats. So it is really designed to flow and create that immersive and powerful experience for you.
I see Anna's asking, is there a lunch break? Yes, there are lots of breaks built in. Thankfully, Danny here is wonderful at building in breaks because we all need them. And Ken is asking, did you mention the anticipated number of attendees?
I did not know, but we're probably expecting somewhere in the range of about 500 people.
Yeah, it's been pretty typical for our online events.
I will share though that, it's not just like when you're in person. Let's say you're in person at an event and there are 500 people in attendance. You're not sitting lecture style and there's a person to your left and to your right. Maybe you're going to be sitting at a table. And so the virtual event is structured in much the same way. And so even though there are a lot of people in attendance, there are a lot of opportunities for you to connect with people in that way.
Wonderful. See. Diana saying, I think what we want to know about for the times of the event is to plan if they have to miss anything or rely on others for all kinds of things. One of the beautiful things that I think might be worth describing for our audience, Danny, is the generosity of our Mirasee community for one thing, and the way that we really facilitate the networking so that you can connect with each other. But I love what Diane's asking, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more, because it's a common thing that we see around here. There's a lot of emotions. You're showing up to this thing, you have a lot of hopes and dreams and wishes, and the emotions are high. And how do we navigate being present and being able to go with the flow and engage in that networking when we're feeling the heightened emotions at an event like this?
Yeah, so the guidance that I would encourage for everyone is to do the best you can to protect your time and be present, but don't feel bad about the stuff that you can't, right? So the session, it's 3 days. It's, 10:30 Eastern to 4:30 Eastern for each of the 3 days. There's the evening session on the first 2 days. So block off as much of that time on your calendar as you can. And if there is a time slot that you can't, don't worry about it. It's not something that requires stress. You'll adapt and you'll get the most out of the time that you're able to be present. And I will share strategies for making sure you capture great ideas, even from the sessions you don't attend, and it will be fine.
Jean is asking a question in the chat. Kind of goes along lines of that because usually a follow-up after that is, well, will it be recorded? So Jean's asking, today's session's recorded. Will the sessions at Lyft be recorded?
So generally, we do not record and share recordings of live event sessions because you've really got to be there live. It's different, right? It's just not the same watching a recording. In the past, we have sometimes made recordings available to people for a limited amount of time afterwards to catch up on things that they missed. We haven't decided yet whether we will do that this time with this event or not, but as much as possible, plan to be there.
Yeah, I really love, the framework of in the before times. I remember going to Lyft when I was a student here, Danny, and I got on a plane and I flew to Montreal. And even though we're home, treating it as if you had done that, because when you're there in Montreal, you're there in the room. You don't say, "Oh, I'm going to go back to my hotel room and go take this call for a while." We actually attend the whole thing. So I would recommend that for anybody who is considering how to manage your time. And like Danny said, do the best that you can. Ken is asking, will there be a structured network catalog of attendees with business cards and area of expertise for networking after the conference? And I believe we do that. We have the intake form. Is that correct, Danny?
Well, yes and no. So we make some of that information available to people who want to share it after the fact. I will say that, in 5 years and many events of doing these, maybe more than that even, we've really been blown away by the kindness and generosity of the community and the respect of, honoring people's personal information. We have literally had one case of someone abusing that directory over all of those years, and we've, asked them not to return, and they didn't. But people are very respectful, and what often happens is that you're gonna have an intake where you fill out all this information about yourself, and you're asked, do you want this shared in a directory? And a lot of people say yes, and a lot of people don't say yes. And then after the event, we get a flurry of emails saying, can you please add my information to the directory after all? So there is absolutely that opportunity.
Wonderful. All right, Ray, I'm going to recommend, and you and I are working together now in a coaching relationship, so you can reach out to me on this, on managing your time. But again, for the schedule, to pick and choose what you might have to miss. Danny, you gave me amazing advice one time way back in the day, and you were like, I believe that we are meant to hear what we're meant to hear when we're there in person. So, manage the time how you need to manage it for your life. And if there's something you miss, as Danny's great at saying, it shouldn't ruin your day. And you will have a table of people who are going to have your back and will provide you with notes. It will truly be amazing. We have some folks in the chat who are describing that right now. Reg, you're asking, you're in ACES, there's a buzz call on Thursday. Whenever there's a MiraC event, all of your buzz calls will be paused. So you'll want to talk with your coach.
We don't do
Yeah.
buzz calls in off sprint months.
Yes.
To the best of my knowledge.
Yes, in ACES, folks will have had their mastermind right before Lyft. So talk with your coach, Reg, so you can get clear on your schedule there. All right. And let's see, Annette, will we have Slack set up for engagement during? Yes, we will have our online discussion space set up. I can confirm this because I am setting it up right now. So we are getting that all set up for you. While people are thinking of more questions, Danny, is there anything that these questions have prompted in your mind of something that we might not have covered yet?
Yeah, so I guess what I'll share is that, we've all had experiences in our lives where it was a great experience. We went in knowing it was going to be a great experience, but also what we went into it didn't really prepare us for what it was going to be and feel like. For me, having children comes to mind. Everyone's like, it's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. Nobody can share details about how. It was very frustrating before my kids were born. But, in my experience, Lyft, and from what I've heard from a lot of attendees, Lyft is a little bit like that in that, yes, you've been to conferences, you've been to trainings, you have a sense of that, but Lyft is a little bit different. You kind of have to experience it to get it. Many people have told me over the years that, it's worth $1,000 and then some. I've had people tell me I implemented stuff I learned and I made, multiples of that within weeks or months. And so you have this massive, massive opportunity, but I want to make it available to a lot of people because I really don't, Lyft is not how we make money, right? We design the Lyft event to basically break even if we're lucky. It's our investment in our relationships with all the people who attend. And so I really hope we get the opportunity to make that investment in all of you.
Love it. Diane says, I'm in. It's going to be your first one. We're so excited, Diane. We're going to be glad to see you there. Dominique is asking, what if we don't want to get involved on Slack? Is it okay? Am I going to get any value without Slack? What would be your advice for Dominique?
We get a lot, what if I can't attend this session? Will it still be good? What if I don't get on Slack? Will it still, there are a lot of those. And look, the answer is that, any participation, any exposure will be better than none, right? Attending one session is better than attending 0. It's not nearly as good as attending all 9 or 11 if you include the evening sessions. Slack adds a lot to the Lyft experience, and attending without Slack is a lot better than not attending at all. So, you know your limits, what degree you are willing to stretch a little bit beyond your limits, but not too much. And so I would encourage you, to the best of your ability, be there and participate in all the sessions and engage in Slack, right? And you can calibrate how engaged, how involved you want to be. And if you're like, no, I absolutely can't do that, then that's fine. That works too.
Wonderful. All right. You know what? We had a question earlier. Margot, I answered you in the chat about coaches. We have some folks in the chat here who are in existing Mirasee programs and have a coaching assignment. So when we're encouraging them to talk with their coach, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
But in terms of coaching, folks who come to Lyft get a chance to make an appointment in a coaching zone. Can we talk about what that's like, Danny, and what kind of value people will get from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team of coaches. We're a training and coaching organization. We have a team of coaches that we actually train for the month leading up to Lyft, specifically on how to conduct, because an ongoing coaching relationship is different from a one-off kind of really focused coaching breakthrough experience. And everyone who attends has the opportunity to sit down with a coach, have a full 30-minute deep dive on their business. And I mean, the feedback that we've received again from people is that it is absolutely transformational. Many people have said the best part of my Lyft experience was my conversation with my coach, which to me, as the guy on stage for 3 days, is not always what I like to hear, but I like to hear it because I know how great our coaches are, and it is very meaningful to me that collectively as a team, we're able to create such a great transformation.
Awesome. Ken's asking, do people get to pick and choose what coach they're going to talk with? Can we talk a little bit about that too, Danny?
Yeah, so we assign the coaches, and we assign them based on a few factors. So one is the intake information you provide when you register for Lyft. And the second is, you're going to have an opportunity to book that coaching session, and you're going to choose a time that works for you. And so you're basically going to get the best fit coach for you, who is available in the time slot that works for you. But you don't choose the coach because, I mean, you don't know the coaches, so that wouldn't even help you.
Oh, Ken, that's sweet. He's saying he's looking at Jim, our lovely coach Jim here. He's a feature of your program and the team. We do love Coach Jim here.
Well, I mean, that kind of speaks to the point. So, I mean, Jim is amazing, right? Jim's been with us for years, and he's a very popular coach for very good reason, right? But, when you say, I see Coach Jim, he's right there. Can Jim be my coach, right? You're not choosing Jim because he's an amazing coach, even though he is, right? Because you don't know, you haven't worked with him. You're choosing Jim because Well, you see him right in front of you, right? You don't know the array of coaches. You don't know the experience they all bring to bear. And so trust us to arrange the fit with the coach that's probably going to be the best fit for you.
Thank you, Danny. We have a great question from Phyllis. So people who've been to Lift before, how is this upcoming Lift content? How is it different from any past lifts that people might have attended? What would be your advice for people who are returnees?
Yeah, I would say that Lyft, the content of Lyft evolves, year to year as my insights change and the world changes for sure. And a lot stays the same. It's a lot like, there are a lot of books that we pick up and read again year to year. We've had a lot of people attend year to year. And it's not about what are all the things that I will learn at this lift that I didn't learn at the last lift, because that's a small list, right? It's more about what are all the things that you will learn better than you weren't able to internalize last year, right? So the question I would put back to you is, if you attended Lift and you internalized everything and you've implemented everything and it's all part of your DNA now, I'd say, well, I mean, don't come, you don't need it. But, there's a great line from Stephen Covey: to know and not to do is really not to know. And the reality is that after, one exposure, we don't know all that well. And so that's the main value, not to mention the, the connection with the community. But what we've seen over and over is that people who've been to Lift 1, 2, 3, 4 times, they come to Lift again and they say, all these things jumped out to me and grabbed my attention that I didn't even notice the last time.
Yes, that's very true. I have seen Lyft many times and I always get something new from it, Danny, even now that I'm on staff. We have a great question from Charlene who says, do you go beyond messaging? Do you dive into outreach marketing like sample scripts to use? So can we address that sort of tangible aspect of Lyft?
I'll say that we cover a lot of very different ground, right? A lot of very different areas and areas of focus in your business. So the short answer is yes. I can't give you like a breakdown. If you want lots of details about what we'll do, go to www.lift.live. But short answer is yes.
Put that link in the chat one more time for everybody. There we go. Details can be found there. You can click that link. It will take you to the page. All right. We have a lot of folks who have been to Lift before in the chat. I love seeing all of your comments about how you've utilized this event to help, even coming back more than once. And of course, we have some new folks joining us, which is very exciting. I'm just going to kind of check through the chat here, make sure I didn't miss anything.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
because I just noticed the time and I promised to try to let people out after 60 minutes and we're already past that.
Okay.
I also see a lot of very kind words in the chat. I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone who has been to Lift, has been a member of the community and is saying very generous things about the experience to help other people get the same experience. I would love for you all to join us. So go to www.lift.live and book your ticket. And if you have questions, whether it's a question that we didn't get to because we missed it in the chat, if that's the case, I apologize, or whether it's just a question that, it comes to mind in 2 hours, 2 days, whatever, just reply to any email that you've received from us. My team will be very happy to get you the best answers we can. And I very much look forward to seeing you all at Lift. So with that, thank you, and I will see you soon. Bye, everyone.